Nobody was supposed to know. That was the first rule, the only rule, and for weeks it had held fragile as glass, balanced on the edge of something no one dared name out loud. But on a gray Tuesday morning, inside the quiet corridors of a royal residence, a man named Daniel Reeves felt the glass begin to crack. Daniel had served as a royal protection officer for 11 years. He had stood in the rain outside hospital doors. He had walked 3 steps behind greatness and never once flinched. He had learned, above all else, to trust his instincts, and right now, every instinct he had was screaming. Something was wrong with Catherine. She had lost weight, not gradually, the way people do when life gets busy. This was different. Her cheekbones sat too sharp beneath her skin. Her eyes, always warm, always present, had grown distant, like someone watching a storm through a window. Waiting for it to reach them, he had noticed it 3 weeks ago. He hadn't said anything then. It wasn't his place, but today was different. Today, he had overheard something he wasn't supposed to hear. He had been standing outside the East Corridor, Standard Post. Nothing unusual when the voices reached him through the partially open door. One voice was calm, controlled. The other was quieter, careful, and the words they exchanged made Daniel's blood go cold. She doesn't need to know the full extent, and if she asks, she won't. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He stood there, rigid, his hand resting near his radio, wondering if what he just heard meant what he thought it meant. He told himself he was overreacting. He told himself there were 1,000 explanations. He had been wrong before, once, early in his career. He had raised an alarm over nothing and spent 6 months rebuilding his reputation. He remembered how that felt. He wasn't eager to repeat it, but this was different. He knew it in his chest, in the hollow space behind his ribs where instinct lives. This was about Catherine, and if he was right, if even a fraction of what he suspected was true, then the woman he had sworn to protect was walking toward something dangerous. And the people closest to her either didn't know or didn't want her to. If this kind of story grips you, you're not alone. Thousands of people just like you come here for stories that feel real, stories that matter. Hit subscribe so you never miss one, because this story is only just beginning. Daniel returned to his post. He kept his face neutral. Years of training had made him good at that, at holding everything still on the outside while the inside churned. He watched the corridor. He watched the doors. He watched the quiet movements of a household that appeared to any outside eye completely ordinary. But Daniel had learned something in 11 years of this work. The most dangerous threats never look dangerous. They come dressed in routine, in familiarity, in trust, and the most dangerous people are always the ones you least expect. Later that evening, as the light faded and the residence grew still, Daniel sat alone in the small staff room at the end of the East Wing. He opened his notebook, the personal one, not the official log, and wrote 3 words. 3 words he immediately crossed out, then wrote again, because some things, once seen, cannot be unseen, and some instincts, once woken, refuse to go back to sleep. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow, he would know more. He just hoped tomorrow wasn't too late. Asterisk, asterisk, the morning came, gray and cold. The kind that settles into stone walls and stays there. Daniel arrived early. He always did. But today he wasn't early for routine. He was early because sleep had refused to come. And lying still in the dark with those 3 crossed-out words circling his mind had become unbearable. He needed to see her. Not officially, just see her. Confirm that she was okay, that he had imagined the worst, and the truth was ordinary tack. Catherine appeared at 9:30. She walked with the same quiet grace she always had, composed. Unhurried, the kind of presence that fills a room without demanding it. She wore a soft blue coat, her hair pulled back. She smiled at the housekeeper in the hall. She paused to look at something through the tall window, the garden, maybe, or the sky beyond it. But Daniel watched her hands, which she had clasped tightly together in front of her, her knuckles, pale against each other. She wasn't calm. She was performing calm. And the difference, to a trained eye, was everything. He kept his post. He kept his face neutral. But inside, the certainty he had hoped wouldn't come came anyway. Quiet and heavy as snowfall. Something was being kept from her. And it was eating her alive. It was just before noon when Daniel first saw it. The moment that changed everything. He was positioned near the main corridor when Camilla appeared. Poised, unhurried, dressed impeccably as always. She moved through the hallway. With the ease of someone entirely comfortable in their surroundings, someone who had long ago decided where they were, belonged, and stopped questioning it. She was heading toward Catherine's private sitting room. Daniel watched. Protocol said he should hold his position. Protocol said this was none of his concern. Two members of the royal family crossing paths in a corridor. There was nothing unusual about that. Nothing at all except for the envelope. It was small, cream-colored, held close to Camilla's side, almost concealed, not hidden, exactly, but not visible either, unless you were looking. Unless your eyes had been trained for 11 years to notice what most people miss. Daniel was looking. He watched. Camilla reached the door to Catherine's sitting room. Watched her pause with her hand raised to knock. And then for just a moment, watched her glance back down the corridor. Left, then right. The kind of glance that means only one thing. Asterisk, is anyone watching? Asterisk. Daniel had already looked away. He was staring at the far wall, expression empty, posture professional. He heard the knock. Heard the door open. Heard it close. He stood completely still. His heart was not still. He didn't know what was in the envelope. He had no right to know, no official reason to ask. To raise a concern now, based on a feeling and a glance and an envelope, he would be laughed out of his post. Or worse, quietly reassigned. He needed more. He needed something real. But even as he stood there, reasoning with himself, a memory was surfacing, something a colleague had mentioned weeks ago, in passing. A small thing. The kind of thing you file away without meaning to. There had been a visitor. Someone who had come and gone without being logged properly. It happened occasionally in formal calls, family connections, the gray areas of royal household protocol. Usually, it meant nothing. But the name his colleague had mentioned was not a name Daniel recognized. And in his world, unknown names and unlogged visits were never nothing. He needed to find out who that person was, and he needed to do it before Camilla's next move, because whatever was in that envelope, whatever was being kept from Catherine, Daniel could feel it building. Could feel it the way you feel a storm before the first drop falls, quiet, heavy, close, and coming fast. Asterisk. Asterisk. The name was Marcus Hale. It took Daniel 2 days to find it. 2 days of quiet, careful digging. Not the kind that leaves traces. The kind that relies on memory, on conversation, on the slow piecing together of fragments that were never meant to form a picture. Marcus Hale was not royal staff. He was not a journalist, not a physician, not a family acquaintance in any official sense. What he was, what Daniel gradually, carefully confirmed, was a man who moved between worlds. A consultant of sorts. The kind of person hired when something needed to happen without a record of it happening. The kind of person whose presence meant someone, somewhere, had made a decision they weren't willing to make openly. Daniel sat with this for a long time. He was not impulsive. He had survived 11 years in this role precisely because he thought before he acted. measured risk against certainty, waited until he was sure. Rushing in with half a truth was more dangerous than staying silent. He knew that. He had seen careers end on that exact mistake, but Catherine's hands came back to him. Pale knuckles, clasped tight. A woman performing calm while something inside her was quietly unraveling. He couldn't stay silent. Not this time. On the third morning, something shifted. Daniel arrived to find the mood of the household changed. It was subtle, the kind of change that doesn't announce itself, that you only feel in the way people move. The way conversations stop half a second too soon when someone walks into a room. He learned, through the quiet channels of staff communication, that Catherine had canceled her afternoon engagements. All of them. Without explanation. That alone was not unusual. She had been unwell. The world knew that, or thought it did. Cancellations happened, but then Daniel saw her face. She was walking from her private corridor toward the garden entrance, not with her usual composure, not performing calm. She looked like someone who had just received news that had taken the floor out from under her. Her eyes were red at the edges. She held her chin up, that famous, quiet dignity, but her hands were shaking. She didn't see Daniel. She rarely did. That was the nature of his role. Present, invisible, protective, unnoticed, but Daniel saw her. And something in him that had been careful and measured and patient for 3 long days simply stopped waiting. He went to his superior that evening. Not with accusations, he was smarter than that. He went with observations. Structured, professional, precise. He laid out what he had seen. The envelope, the unlogged visitor, the name Marcus Hale. The change in Catherine's appearance and manner over recent weeks. He presented it the way he had been trained to present threat assessments, calmly, factually, without embellishment. His superior listened. Then there was a long silence. "Where did you get the name?" His superior asked. Staff conversation. Nothing formal. Another silence. Longer. Daniel. The voice was careful, measured. "You understand what you're suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm reporting observations. You're implying that someone in this household is deliberately withholding information from the Princess of Wales. That is not a small claim." "No," Daniel said. "It isn't." The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. And then his superior said something Daniel hadn't expected. Not a dismissal. Not an order to stand down. Something quieter, and in its own way, far more troubling. "Give me 24 hours. Daniel nodded. He left the office. He walked back to his post. 24 hours. He could only hope that was soon enough. Because somewhere in this building, Catherine was alone with whatever truth was being hidden from her. And whatever it was already doing damage. The only question now was how much more damage it could do. 24 hours passed, then 30-6. No. Word from his superior. No summons. No quiet knock on the door of the staff room. No message through the internal system. Nothing. Daniel kept his post. He kept his face still. But with every hour that passed, the silence grew heavier until it no longer felt like patience. It felt like a wall. On the second morning, he saw his superior in the east corridor and caught his eye for just a moment. The look he received back was not reassurance. It was a warning. Drop it. Not in words, but clear as a spoken sentence. Maybe clearer. Daniel looked away. He nodded, just slightly, the professional acknowledgement of a man who understands his boundaries. He did not drop. Something had changed in Catherine's routine. She was no longer taking her morning walk in the garden. She had reduced her visible movements through the residence to almost nothing. Staff who had regular access to her sitting room were being redirected gently, politely, but redirected. The small circle around her had quietly contracted. It could mean a dozen things. It could mean she was simply resting, recovering, following medical guidance. It could mean nothing at all, but Daniel had been doing this job long enough to know when a circle was contracting for protection and when it was contracting for control. This felt like the latter. On the third day, he made a decision he knew could end his career. He didn't go through official channels. He had tried that, and the door had closed. So instead, he did something smaller, quieter, something that left no record. He sent a note, not through the staff system, not through any formal route. He folded a single sheet of paper, just a few lines, carefully chosen, and he asked a member of Catherine's personal staff, a woman named Ellie, who had served the princess for 6 years and whose loyalty Daniel had quietly observed and trusted, to pass it along. He told Ellie only this: "It's important that she sees it. Please." Ellie looked at him for a long moment. She looked at the folded paper. She looked back at him. Then she took it. Daniel walked back to his post. He felt the weight of what he'd done settle over him. Not guilt, exactly, but the particular gravity of a line crossed. He had gone outside the system. He had acted on instinct and conscience rather than protocol. If it came to light, there would be consequences. Serious ones, but Catherine's shaking hands wouldn't leave him. Her red-jet eyes, the pale grip of her knuckles, the way she'd held her chin up even when everything else was crumbling. Some things were worth the risk. 3 hours later, something happened that Daniel hadn't anticipated. He was called to a room he had never been summoned to before, not by his superior, not by anyone in the formal chain of command, but by a member of Catherine's personal security detail. A quiet, direct man named Graham, who had been with the princess for years and who Danielle had always respected from a careful distance. Graham simply said, "She'd like to see you." Daniel felt the air shift around him. "Me? Now, if possible." He followed Graham down a corridor he rarely walked, past doors he rarely passed, to a small sitting room that looked out onto the garden. The kind of room designed for private conversation, modest, warm, away from the main flow of the household. He stepped inside. Catherine was standing by the window. She turned when he entered. Her expression was composed, that same quiet dignity she carried everywhere, but her eyes were searching his face with an intensity that made it clear she already knew why he was there. In her hand was his note. The room felt very still. "Sit down," she said gently. "Please." And Daniel, for the first time in 11 years of standing guard, sat down in the presence of royalty and began to tell her everything. Asterisk, asterisk, he spoke carefully. He had rehearsed this, not the words exactly, but the shape of it. The facts first. The observations. The name Marcus Hale. The unlogged visit. The envelope he had watched Camilla carry. The way the circle around Catherine had tightened quietly over recent weeks. He did not accuse anyone directly. He was too careful for that, and too honest. He didn't know the full truth. He only knew what he had seen and what it had made him feel. Catherine listened without interrupting. That, in itself, told him something. A person hearing false information tends to frown, to shift, to look for the gap where the story breaks down. Catherine did none of that. She sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, not the tight, pale grip he had noticed before, but something steadier. As though what he was saying, however difficult, was also somehow a relief. When he finished, the silence lasted several seconds. Then she said, "How long have you known?" "Suspected," he corrected quietly. 3 weeks. "But I didn't have enough to bring to anyone until recently." She nodded. She looked out toward the garden. The light was fading, long shadows reaching across the grass. "The envelope," she said at last. "I received it." Daniel waited. "I was told it was correspondence, private, from a family matter. I was told not to share its contents." She paused. I was told it was for my own well-being." The way she said those last 4 words, "for my own well-being," was not angry. It was something quieter and harder than anger. It was the sound of a person who has just understood that what was offered as care was actually a kind of cage. She told him what she knew. Not everything. Daniel could sense the edges of what she was holding back. The parts too private or too painful to share with a man she barely knew. But enough. There had been information regarding her health, specific, detailed information that had been passed through a third party rather than given to her directly. Information that had been filtered, shaped, and in some cases simply withheld, on the basis that certain people around her had decided she was not yet strong enough to hear it. They had made that decision without her consent, and in doing so, they had left her in the dark, frightened, isolated, unable to make fully informed choices about her own body and her own future. Daniel felt something cold move through him, not at Camilla. Personally, he was careful not to jump to simple conclusions. He didn't know how much Camilla understood about what she had been asked to carry. He didn't know who had made the original decision, who had spoken to Marcus Hale, who had decided that Catherine's truth belonged to someone else. But he knew that Catherine had been wronged, quietly, carefully, with good intentions or self-serving ones he couldn't yet say, but wronged. And she had been alone with it. "Why did you come to me?" Catherine asked. "You could have been reassigned. Or worse." Daniel thought about this. He had thought about it many times over the past 3 weeks, turning it over in the small hours of sleepless nights. "Because it's my job," he said finally. "Not the official one. The real one." She looked at him. Really looked at him the way people rarely look at the people who protect them. Because protection is easy to take for granted when it is constant and quiet and asks nothing in return. "The real one," she repeated softly. "To keep you safe," he said. "Not just from people outside the gates, from anything." The room was very quiet. Outside, the last light was leaving the garden. Catherine looked down at the note in her hands, the small folded square that had started all of this. Then she looked back up. "I need your help," she said. "Not as a protection officer, as someone I can trust." It wasn't a question, but Daniel answered it anyway. "Yes," he said, simply, completely, without hesitation. "Yes." And with that single word, everything changed. What came next would test them both in ways neither of them was fully prepared for. Because the truth, once Catherine had all of it, would not stay quiet. And the people who had worked so hard to control it would not simply step aside. The real danger. Daniel was beginning to understand. Hadn't passed. It was only just beginning. The next 72 hours moved the way crises always do. Not in a sudden crash, but in a slow, unstoppable tide. Daniel began by doing what he did best: watching, listening, mapping the small movements of the household. With the precision of someone who had spent over a decade learning that the truth always lives in the details, he confirmed, through careful and quiet means, that Marcus Hale had visited the residence on 2 separate occasions, neither of them logged. He identified the staff member who had facilitated the visits, a personal aide who had since been quietly moved to a different posting. He traced the chain of communication back, link by careful link, until the shape of it became clear. The information about Catherine's health, specific assessments made by her medical team, had been passed to a small group of people outside her immediate circle. People who had decided, collectively, that certain findings were too distressing to share with her directly, that she needed to be protected from the full picture. They had not asked her permission. They had not informed her physician of their decision. They had simply acted with the certainty of people who believed they knew best, and in doing so, they had taken something from her that no one had the right to take. Her own story. Catherine confronted it with a grace that Daniel found. Privately, extraordinary. There were no public scenes. No dramatic confrontations in echoing corridors. This was not that kind of story, and she was not that kind of woman. What happened instead was quieter and, in its own way, far more powerful. She requested a formal meeting with her medical team, all of them, together, with no intermediaries present. She asked for every document, every assessment, every finding to be presented to her directly and in full. She made clear, in language that was calm and precise and absolute, that all future communication regarding her health would pass through her. Alone, no exceptions. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Daniel stood outside the door the entire time. He heard nothing. The walls were thick, the voices low. But when Catherine emerged, she looked different, not lighter. Exactly, the truth is rarely light, but grounded, present, herself. She met his eyes as she passed, and something moved between them, not words, just understanding. The particular understanding of two people who have stood at the edge of something and come back from it. As for the others, those who had made the decision, those who had believed they were protecting her, the fallout was handled with the same quiet precision. Daniel was never told the specifics. That wasn't his place, and he didn't ask. He knew only that conversations happened at levels above his, that certain arrangements within the household were quietly restructured, and that Marcus Hale's name disappeared from any further mention. Camilla and Daniel had come to believe, in the end, that she had understood less of what she was carrying than he had initially feared was not part of the reckoning. The envelope she had delivered had been passed to her by someone else. She had been a link in a chain she may not have fully seen. That was not nothing, but it was not the same as having built the chain. These things are rarely simple. In the weeks that followed, Daniel returned to his post. Same corridor, same position, same professional stillness on the outside, but something inside him had settled the way things settle after a long, difficult honesty. He had done what he came to do. He had kept her safe. Not from an intruder at the gate, not from a threat the security manuals had prepared him for, but from something smaller and more insidious, the quiet erosion of a person's right to know their own truth. That mattered. He believed that deeply. And Catherine, who had walked through something that would have broken many people, who had held her chin up even when the floor was gone, who had looked a near stranger in a quiet room and said, "I need someone I can trust." Catherine was still here, still standing, still herself, somewhere. In the garden below the east wing window, the light was coming back, slow and certain, the way it always does, the way it always has. And Daniel Reeves, 11 years a guardian of people who rarely see him, stood at his post and for the first time in a long time, felt that it was enough, that he was enough. Some stories don't end with a headline. They end in a quiet room with the truth finally spoken and a person finally free. And sometimes that is the most powerful ending of all.